Plotting, as I invoke the word here, is an approach to world building and freedom dreaming that goes back centuries. As Jamaican philosopher Sylvia Wynter explains, the plot existed alongside the plantation economy. But from early, she writes, the planters gave the enslaved plots of land on which to grow food to feed themselves in order to maximize profits. She suggests that this plot system was the focus of resistance to the market system and market values. And she goes on to explain, around the growing of yam, of food for survival, the enslaved created on the plot a folk culture, the basis of a social order in 300 years. And so today, we are continuing to plot in many different ways, laying the groundwork, perhaps, for the next 300 years. Whether digging deep or sowing seeds far and wide, plotting is about questioning the scripts we've all been handed and scheming with others, plotting to write a new poetics of living that is sustaining, nourishing, and creative. To riff off of Butler again, it may be the end of the world, but there are other worlds. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Kamora Herrington, the founder and visionary of Kamora's Cultural Corner, has a long tenure of working for social justice. Using cultural humility as a foundation, Kamora's work includes advocating for racial, gender, and economic justice, educating and supporting youth, and helping organizations incorporate social justice values into their operations so that this work spreads out further into the world. The Harriet Beecher Stowe Center benefited from working with Kamora, who, over the course of 8 weeks, facilitated discussion and inquiry into cultural humility as part of social and racial justice training. And we are proud to be part of the Kamora's Cultural Corner community. Kamora actively creates a world where families are free to love their children. Her work illuminates the ways that we are all connected, and injustice to one is injustice to all. Indeed, Kamora lives the values of viral justice, and I am pleased to introduce her as our moderator for this evening's discussion with Dr. Benjamin. Kamora Herrington.
Hello. Okay, so I am incredibly happy right now. I can't tell you how excited I am and how excited I am that you are here in Hartford with us. And Kate gave me a call a couple months ago and said, hey, Kamora, you've been working with us and it might make sense. So yes, heck yeah, I've got a chance to go talk. I will do it happily. And then I jumped into the book. And I fell in love with your voice. So, and complete disclosure, I've been busy. I listened to it. So I truly fell in love with your voice.
It took me a long time to record that book, so I would love for you to listen to it.
Yup. And fell in love with your voice and fell in love with your story. And my 11-year-old, a couple weeks ago, we were getting ready for this. I said, we're gonna watch one of this woman's videos. We're gonna watch this video, and then afterwards we're gonna talk about it, and you're gonna tell me how you feel about it, right? And you started, and about 5 minutes in, he was like, Mom, she sounds like you, right? And in the last few years of my life, I've been finding all of the we's, right? And so I've been finding the social justice activist people who are now growing stuff. And then there's the farmers who are now doing social, and all of this, and it comes together like it should, right? So we're where we need to be right now doing what we're doing. Thank you for including me in your presentation. Sister, what? So there was the moment, so we're here, and Kimberly is here, and Versatile's here, and you're here, and I'm here. And as we walked in, if anyone here watches the Black Lady Sketch Show, okay, there's that quick moment of, is this the courtroom? Are we supposed to be? But this is where we're supposed to be. So Kate, I want to thank you, because for the last however many years, I've been seeing everyone wear the shirts, right? Everyone says, listen to Black women, listen to Black women, listen to Black women. Thank you for taking the charge. And thank you for creating this space, right? And thank you for asking me to do this so that I can amplify my sister's voice and her work. And together, we're going to bring Octavia into the room, because we can't not, right? Because as we do this work, Octavia Butler, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you, right? And that's there. Everyone hold that for 1 second, because I want to go to where you brought, because this is lineage work. And you start the book, and you start us here tonight with the White House. And you tell us where you came from, right? And you talk about Grandma White. And she was an abolitionist, right? An undercover abolitionist, right? So Grandma White, undercover abolitionist, doing her work. I am a Black woman of a certain age, from a certain space, and we talk about this work of making our ancestors proud and being our ancestors' wildest dreams. So before we do anything else, I want to talk about you and your grandmother, and in what ways you see your work right now. What were her wildest dreams, and how are you living this?
Yes, I love that. So let me just call her name, Paulitha V. White. And any space that I'm in, I feel not only my grandmother, but I feel ancestors in the rafters. I don't go anywhere alone, and I feel like all of us, if we tap into it, it's like a veil. It's right there on the other side. So if the question is, what were my ancestors, or what were Grandma White's wildest dreams? When I think of that, the first thing that comes to mind is that it would be for me to have my own dreams. So rather than think that I'm fulfilling her dreams, or how I'm sort of realizing the past, it's the freedom for me to have my own dreams, my own thoughts, like the definition of freedom, right? When so many things are trying to constrict that ability. And so I think it's part of her personality was to be kind of very, detached is the wrong word, but not to be imposing, not to make me a mini her. And I think that's hard when often our definitions of love are conflated with possessiveness, where we exude love by, just constraining and holding things tight rather than saying, be free, be you, realize your dreams. And I think that I feel a sense of permission from her and the other elders in my community, that it was never about trying to walk in their footsteps or do what they wanted me to do. There was a real sense of, let us put something under you that will allow you to move in the world, to fulfill your own purpose, not ours, right? And so I think that that's a different way also for us, and I think maybe we'll get to this towards the end of our conversation, is for all of us to think about what kind of ancestor we want to be, right? When we think forward in time, and how we exercise love, and trying not to have it be infiltrated with these really toxic ideas of power and domination and possessiveness, right? And so it's something I think that we actually have to practice. I don't think it comes naturally, because everything else around us is giving us a very distorted sense of what love is. So I think we actually have to practice that ability so that it can be part of our legacy.
And there's that soft love. And one of the things that I was completely hit by in your book, you deal with ugly stuff. People bring you ugly stuff. You teach ugly stuff. And you've got this book that is confrontational and in your face and demands that people step into action, yet you stay soft. Why? Why?
Yeah, such an interesting sort of observation. And again, I haven't always approached things like this. This is sort of, if I'd tried to write a book like this 10 years ago, I couldn't have. It wouldn't have come across like this.
But you touched something and it changed you and now changed.
Yes. And so, you know, just thinking about, I mean, part of it I think is it grows out of being a teacher and thinking about, you know, how do we invite students or others or readers into learning, into growth, right? Like if we really want them to grow and to learn, you can't flood them with water or flood them with sunshine. As much as you think those things might be good in and of themselves, when you put too much, you know, and it's too heavy, then you actually do the opposite of what you want, which is to nurture this thing. So part of it is sort of this, you know, growing from my pedagogical strategies, thinking about being a teacher. It's like, you know, there's this idea out of the Baha'i faith, which is that you have to be very careful about how much and what you say if you want to meet people where they are. You know what I mean? Like, even the best thing, when it's too much, it's gonna have the opposite effect. And so it's part of it is that kind of learning what is actually effective in terms of communication and exchange and learning, so that we get the outcome that we want, and that we approach people as co-learners, like we're figuring this thing out together. And so I think about like my own process, like if someone comes at me and just, you know, swats me about the face with all the data and the statistics, or how complicit I am, and gives me no sense of agency. Okay, with that knowledge, now what? So one of the first classes I taught at Princeton was called Race is Socially Constructed, now what? And all the students, they just abbreviated it, and around campus, are you in now what? Now what? That was the name of the class, because it was the kind of thing where you can get the knowledge, but then what do you do with it? How do you channel it? You know? And so part of this approach to the book, I think, has come from now years and years of teaching and thinking about what's effective in that way.
And I'm thinking about listening to you speak and seeing you speak, and this interesting place of it's systemic. We need to understand racism is systemic. We've got to address systems. You know what? There's some people, and these people are racist. We got to address these people. But it's a system. And so I don't even want to deal with the binary nonsense, right? So it's systems, we can only address systems. It's people, we can only address people. It's both, and it's that dance, and it's that weave. And how do you work that conversation? How do you hold folks in a place where we understand it's all about you and it's not about you? It's not about you.
I love it. You know, it's the thing. You know, in the beginning of the book, I talk about how I'm struggling with this, my own training as a sociologist, and how we have given the world this language of systems and institutions and macro, and really thinking about the connection between things. But in my own training, I grew an allergy towards anything that was associated with the individual. Like, because we work so hard as a field to say, it's not just about individuals, it's about all these other structures, then I have a really hard time. And I say have, because even to the last period in the book, I'm concerned that people are going to read it through the prism of our hyper-individualist society and read it as a self-help book, right? Like, if I just do this myself and kind of forget that what I'm saying is that you as an individual need to turn your head to the left, turn your head to the right, look around you, join arms with others who are also working in that plot, not thinking you can save the world yourself. And I'm thinking also about the training ongoing of my own students in university settings that get this kind of entrepreneurial mindset where it's kind of like, okay, there's housing inequities, let me create an app for that. Or there's healthcare disparities, let me create a new platform for that. Where, again, it's really not thinking about who in my community has been working on housing inequities before I was even born. Who around me has been working on health injustice, right, that I need to learn from before I try to create a fix for it. And so it's really going back to cultural humility. The corollary in my context is intellectual humility. Like admitting and knowing what you do not know and learning from people around you, and then asking, how can I be of service? How can I help? How can I put my energies and talents into this plot that others have been tilling before I was even a thought? And so part of it is to empower individuals to lend their energies to the collective, not to assume that they are gonna, by themselves, magically transform things that are millennia or decades in the making, right? It's a tough balance, but I think it comes down to the fact that when we say institutions and we say systems, we have to remember that human beings make up institutions, human beings make up systems, and we have inherited this racist architecture, this classist, sexist, architecture that has been built over time. But it's been built through human action, decisions, habits, forms of thought. And so part of putting the humans back into the systems and the institutions is to recognize that we can make other choices. We can erect a different kind of structure. But you have to know that it comes out of our sort of doing. You can't assume that, it's inevitable that we are living in this mess. Because once you start to think it's inevitable, then you give up your power to do anything, right?
We've all got to own our power. We also need to figure out when to step in and when to step out. So I'm going to go to the metaphoric place of where is your plot, right? And I want to talk about the Corbett tenets, because the way that you inserted yourself, I think, is a lesson for all of us. You didn't belong up in there. You didn't live up in there. That wasn't your hood. It wasn't your hood anymore. But you belong there. But you put yourself there. And can you just share a little bit of what that felt like inside, to put yourself where you didn't belong but you needed to be?
Yeah, it's simple. You ask the people what they want you to do. You don't assume that you know that you are going to direct anything. So they were very clear. We need you to do this. We need you to contact who you know at BU and ask them to put pressure on the university. We need you to post this on social media. We need you to call X, Y, and Z. So part of it is not inserting, but listening and following directions, right? And knowing that those, again, who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution and have an idea of how to then marshal this interest and energy from others. Again, going back to that humility, it's like not being part of it, you're not at the center of it, right? But it's, knowing that you might have a certain status or title that they can use to get something done, and letting them do that, right?
Yes, that's something. So on September 10th here at the Stowe House, the Black Infinity Collective held a day of storytelling and discussing housing insecurity and housing issues, because housing is the issue. And housing across the board is touching us in all the different ways. And in the book, you definitely talk about the Corbett tenets and that whole, this doesn't speak to America. Boston University owns apartment buildings in Los Angeles, and people in Los Angeles are going to lose their homes, and no one in Boston Newark cared, right? And this happens far too often. And housing, we can talk about redlining, we can talk about VA loans, we can talk about what did and didn't happen. But right now in the United States of America,
right now in Hartford,
right now here, housing is an issue. And when we bring up housing, and I'm thinking of many conversations, and we do, at the corner we come together and we discuss the things that don't have 1 or 2 or 27 answers, right? And as we're talking about housing in Hartford, and I've got beautiful, amazing young people who understand that it's racist, right? And that this is the outcome of a bunch of racist practices. What can the rest of us do to bolster them as they go out and say these things? Because there's this interesting thing that happens at the KCC. Often people say, you know what, and I was talking about this at work, and I said, it's racist because we all know it's racist. And then they said, well, why? It's not. And what is our responsibility at that point? So for all of us here, we're screaming that it's racist. How do we flesh this out?
You're going to tell me. You're going to
tell me. I'm happy to be here. These people hear me all the time. The KCC hears me. But how do we do this? Yeah.
I don't know. In that situation, I always think how you do something really matters. This specific dynamics of that context really matter. Who's on the other side of that? Who is pushing back against that? and really understanding, like, what they're going to be receptive to, and also knowing when you can't convince certain people. Like, there's certain battles and conversations and reasoning that is a waste of our energy also. So we also have to think about, like, strategically, where should we be trying, what are the levers, where are we going to press, right? And so when it comes to convince me this is racist, my thing is, convince me that it's not. Like, everything, the preponderance of history and sociality and everything has been in one direction. And so I think the onus is on you to explain to me how none of that matters in this situation. So I become kind of stubborn, and I don't accept the position of being a teacher, like a Racism 101 teacher, when there's an investment in ignorance. Like, you are invested in not knowing. And so I think that, that's part of it, is that that's in some ways a waste. That's a decision that you're making to not know and to explain it away. So when I think of what is racism, there's many great definitions. One that I sort of fall back in my mind is that in many ways racism is a form of theft. It was used to justify the theft of land and labor and human life, but it steals our relationships as well. Like, it robs us of our human connection. But racism is also, it's not a not knowing. Like, we think, oh, it's the people in the hillbillies, the backwoods, the trailer parks. We associate that with racism. No. Racism was crafted and erected in the citadels of learning. Science and scientists have been the crucial architects of our racist structures, right? And so that's why when I talk to audiences that are filled with researchers in science, and they think, oh, this is a political thing, this is out there, I'm like, no, your fields created this ideology, and so you are responsible for combating it. So don't try to outsource it, don't try to externalize it. And so I think once we start to understand how much effort has gone into creating these categories, these hierarchies, these illusions, then one, it helps us appreciate, a lot has gone into this, so then it falls back on us and says, it's going to take a lot to combat this and, sort of address this. But any starting point, there has to be just an appreciation for, like, you have to acknowledge this history and the sociality, because otherwise you are invested in ignorance. We can't work together. I can't convince you of something that your sense of identity is tied to your not knowing this and explaining this away. And so there's nothing I can do in that scenario,
And that piece I'm going to hold on to, because that's incredibly important. There's some people who are so wedded to this. And I think about your book that started off with, it was going to be viral racism, but then you changed your mind, and coming back to that beautiful soft place, but it's viral justice, right? And so you chose justice rather than racism. Why?
So I was, imagine it's spring 2020, the protests are popping off, we're on lockdown, and I see discourse that is feigning surprise that these things are happening. The pandemic and its hit on Black and brown communities and the protests. And so I'm thinking, okay, this has long been with us, and I'm thinking about racism as a kind of, virus. But then the words of a mentor echo in my head from a previous book that I was working on, where I was floating some titles, and he wrote back and he said, Ruha, we as intellectuals often name things. We give a lot of intellectual space to naming what we don't want, the problem, right? And we have a very sophisticated vocabulary to all of the nuances and patterns and structures, all the things that are killing us. We are working so precisely to name so that we don't flatten it with, everything is racism. We have a elaborate vocabulary. We said, but we don't carve out hardly any intellectual space to name what we want more of. And so if we accept the power of naming, then by not naming these things in the affirmative, the things that we want to water and grow, that in many ways we are becoming complicit in this huge, let's say, imbalance of our imagination, right? About not thinking clearly, trying to imagine, what does freedom feel like? What does justice look like? Who's doing that work? Shining a light on it, learning from it so that we can try it out in our locale, right? So that was partly very early in the process to help me shift from viral racism to viral justice. Because I said, I'm not, even though half of the book, as you said, is like going deep into the muck, right? So it's not a hunky-dory story. Like, you're gonna have to take breaks, you know, and like digest and, you know.
Hartford, read chapter 4. Hartford, read chapter 4. Hartford, if you haven't read anything else yet, and people, KCC people have heard over and over, read chapter 4.
Read chapter 4.
Hartford.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, look, so there's a lot of viral racism in the book. That is to say, thinking about how we got here, what it feels like and looks like. But it's like almost like my own, like remember I said earlier on, like we have to practice this thing. It doesn't come naturally. So while you're reading, you can even just imagine me talking to myself like, Ruha, you have to go find an example of someone working on, you know, what does housing justice look like? What does abolition look like? What does health justice look like? I'm pushing myself in the writing to find these examples in order to try to build that imagination up so that we can all begin to, you know, sort of learn from it and grow. So, you know, left to my own devices and without that counsel from that advisor, I would still be kind of stuck in that sort of only the problem space and not thinking about, okay, what's the treatment? What's the treatment? Like imagine going to the doctor, you know, and them taking the biopsy and giving you the results and they tell you there's no treatment, sorry, you gotta go home. Like as an educator, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to my students. And that's what it felt like early on, like the sociology of all the bad things, you know? See you next week. And so I started to push myself, like, okay, if we're gonna talk about redlining, then we're gonna talk about those housing justice advocates down the street in Philly who are doing X, Y, and Z. Like, I'm not gonna let you leave class without knowing that people are not sitting idly by and just victims of these processes, because that's not the real story. That's not the whole history. So like I said, in my pedagogy, which then becomes my writing, I'm pushing myself to try to show us that we don't just have to submit, click submit, right? And so there are many examples of individuals, groups, movements who, despite the odds, despite the blazes and the fires, putting on their masks and like, no, we're gonna deal with this. We're gonna put this out and we're gonna plant something in the rubble, you know.
5 minutes. Okay, so I've got that big wish, but I do need to just more right. We're gonna get there, but I do want to. So you have traveled the country. People find you. People chase you. You've got amazing examples in the book, and the book is not a roadmap, but the book is a roadmap. The book gives you places to fall in and imagine and think and go to those beautiful places and think of what could be next. And I love assigning books, and I love learning through reading, but I don't use books like yours often. So right now, your book is on our fall reading list, and it's like, hey, that's the nonfiction one, right? But it's gotta be fiction. And hopefully there's been enough of a commercial for Parable of the Sower in here, right? So Octavia Detler, right? Read your Parable. If you already read Parable of the Sower, read Parable of the Talents. Come talk to us about all of it. But if you had to come up with a piece of fiction, and I'm gonna push you because I got you on the poetry thing, and that was beautiful, right? So no Sonia Sanchez, we're not pulling her in here. But what would be the fantasy? What is the book? What should be the companion book that goes along with viral justice that's just going to help me go to those places I need to go to think? I don't care.
So, you know, I mean, part of it is that I think we learn through so many different modes. Like we talked about, some people listen to the book. I think, you know, I use and refer to art and images a lot in both my public speaking and my teaching. I teach a whole class called Black Mirror, Race, Technology, and Justice. That's a uses the Black Mirror TV, series as a jumping off point. So I would actually say, rather than pairing it with another book to read, I would think of media that pings different parts of our brain that can be put in conversation. And there's a short film that you can look at online and watch alongside this called Pumzi, Pumzi. And it's by a Kenyan filmmaker. It's a speculative sci-fi in the tradition of Butler, but it's based in East Africa. And I would pair Pumzi with Viral Justice, and, you're not gonna like this, I would say for the people who you might otherwise assign another fiction, I would say, you're gonna write your own short story that's gonna take one of the themes in Viral Justice, and you're gonna create a world and imagine speculatively what it looks like to do X, Y, and Z. So rather than read something else, you're gonna watch Pumzi and you're gonna write your own short story that's in this tradition. Is that okay?
That's wonderful.
Okay.
Ella, did you get that? Okay, so y'all, when we get there tonight, we know what the assignment is, we know what we're doing for the next week. And here's the fun when we discuss this. This is lifetime work. We are where we are today in the way that we are today. Our children are going to have the work. Our grandchildren are going to have the work. Noreen, I am so incredibly happy that you are here tonight. I am so incredibly happy you're here tonight. This woman, Baha'i woman who grew up with my daddy. So know that you being here, this is my father's old planner. It has the very last grocery list that he wrote before he passed. I bring this when I'm in places that are bigger than myself. I bring this. You being here is wonderful. Because I know that what I'm doing is based on what came before me, right? And we're here. And I really hope that my children get something from this, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And I ask you, as I ask anyone who comes in and wants to do any of this work with me, there's no super Negro. No one's fixing this today or tomorrow. So what is the thing that you own, the physical, tangible object that you own, that you want go with me on this one, folks, okay? That you would like for your grandchild to share with their grandchildren, to tell them who you are at this time and this space?
Such a good question. I mean, everyone should answer that with their neighbor. That's such an amazing question. And I'm gonna cheat. So there's two things. One would be, I think, this ring that my mom gave me that has the greatest name on it, Ya Baha'u'llah from the Baha'i Faith. So that would be something because it's coming even before me, so I'm passing that down. The other thing I think I would give is, I saw your bees. At the beginning of the pandemic, my family started raising bees. So we have our beehives, and I've been learning a lot about bees. And I would give a jar of honey from our bees. I believe it can last, I don't know, like how long? Hundreds of years, right? So it's not gonna spoil. But the lesson in passing down that jar of honey is this. The bees that are working right now in my hives to create the honey for the winter, they are not gonna be alive to enjoy that honey. They are working now so that their ancestors will be able to survive the winter. So the lesson for us is, the work that we're doing now, we're not necessarily gonna enjoy the fruits of, but we have to do it. And so I hope when they get that little jar of honey, they know I was trying, and now they have to try, and that's part of what we do. And that's what we learn from our little apiary kin, our little bee relatives. They're teaching us how to be human, how to work collectively, how to not be selfish. And so I think that honey will remind them of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the roadmap. Thank you so much, Stowe Center, for bringing this together. Is there Q&A time now or no? No, okay, there's no Q&A time. And I just want to share that Kamora's Cultural Corner exists because for a very long time I've said things that people don't enjoy hearing. And after the meetings and after the workshops, people would come and say, hey, Kamora, can we talk about it? And people would end up on my back porch and we'd be talking about it. So right now, we got some amazing, beautiful spiritual food. We got assignments, and we've got stuff to talk about and think about and contemplate. And so I would like to invite absolutely anyone who would like to come. We're outside. I think we've got 3 fire pits going on right now. Come hang out with some weirdo freaks who love calling themselves weirdo freaks. Enjoy dwelling in the unknown. And enjoy basking in each other's wisdom. So if you would like to come continue this conversation, please come continue the conversation with us. And again, thank you so much for giving us this gift, and thank you. Peace.
Don't get stung by the bees.
Well, I definitely don't have anything more powerful to say than thank you. What an amazing program. Thank you, Kamora. Thank you, Versatile. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Dr. Ruha Benjamin. You are an amazing person. Thank you for joining us in Hartford tonight.